Hey everyone, it's Dominic. Today we're talking about terrariums. So let's get into it. So basically a terrarium is like one of those tiny little ecosystems in a jar. Like they can be filled with moss, plants, even like tiny people. You know, I'm sure you've seen pictures of these things floating around the web. So basically today I'm going to show you how I made one of these and then basically like how it works. So if you're interested, keep watching. All right, so I picked out a jar from the dollar store and started out with my false bottom. So the false bottom is the bottom of the terrarium, and it's the place where the water is going to be stored. I filled up the bottom of the jar with gravel from the backyard. On top of this, I put a filter. So what this filter does is it keeps the false bottom separate from the soil. And after this, I put a layer of charcoal on it from our fire pit. All right, so after this, you're gonna add your soil, and what I used for soil is just this like moisture soil. Basically, it's what my grandma had, so I used it. I did read that moss, that's what I fill my terrarium with. It likes the soil to be slightly acidic, but I haven't really noticed any problems with the soil I'm using so far. So yeah, I'm just using this soil. So from here, I decorated the inside with rocks. Basically, you can get some cool looking designs. Really just be as creative as you want with this. Honestly, I don't think my design was the best, but I mean, it works. I mean, it's my first design, so I think it looks all right. So after you add like the rocks and stuff, you're just gonna add your moss. I personally think that moss is pretty easy to use in a terrarium, so that's what I used. Basically, you can find moss anywhere, so that's a really big plus. Like obviously you're gonna find more moss if it's like spring, summer, fall, around that time, but you know, basically you can find it anywhere, anytime. So I had this awesome vision of like deep diving into all the mosses. Basically that didn't happen, so there's a lot of mosses, it turns out. So there's like pincushion moss, there's sphagnum moss, there's star moss, there's like so many types of mosses, and I'm not an expert on this, so I just decided I would keep my non-expert advice out of this video. Now when adding the moss, basically there's no right or wrong way. So these guys grow on the ground, they grow on like bark, they grow on statues of people. Basically anywhere you put it, it's gonna be great. So just put them anywhere and everywhere that looks good. I mean, that's what I did. From there, I use a spray bottle to spray non-chlorinated water into the terrarium. You just spray on the glass sides of the terrarium. The reason you use non-chlorinated water is because basically moss doesn't like chlorinated water, okay? Simple as that. After that, I capped it off and put it with my other plants in the sunlight. And that's it. Just kidding. There's parts about the terrarium that I intentionally left out, and that's only because I want to explain how the terrarium works. So basically the terrarium is a little ecosystem, and since it's an ecosystem, everything needs to be balanced. So there's like 3 things that needs to be balanced. So there's like water, nutrients, gases, all right? And I'm sure there's like more, but like that's what I'm covering today. All right, so let's start with the first one. So water, like how does the water get balanced in here? So basically, you pretty much only need to water this one time, okay? And it goes through the water cycle. So you remember the water cycle, right? So evaporation, condensation, precipitation. So evaporation, that's when there's a body of water, the water rises up into the sky and condensates as clouds, and then it precipitates as like rain, snow, hail, etc. Basically, the same thing happens in this little jar. So the water's down here, right? It evaporates, condensates on the jar. Can you see that right there? It's like a little cloud, except not a cloud. Anyways, after that, it precipitates right back down into the water reservoir, all right? It's a cycle. Oh, and also, if you guys were wondering why there's charcoal in here, basically the charcoal filters the water out. So if the water's evaporating or if it's precipitating, all the bad stuff like stays where the charcoal is at. All right, so the second thing that needs to be balanced is the nutrients. So basically there's nutrients in the soil already. Those nutrients are gonna be taken up by the moss and gonna go into the moss, all right? And then eventually the moss is gonna die. See, like parts of the moss is already getting brown now. And after the moss dies, it's gonna go onto the soil. The moss is gonna be broken down and that the nutrients in that dead moss is going to go back into the soil, and it's just going to be a cycle. Into the soil, into the moss, into the soil, into the moss. So the nutrients, therefore, are balanced. And the last thing that needs to be balanced in a terrarium for it to survive for a long time is the gases. And when I'm talking about the gases, what I'm talking about is two different types of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. So we all know about photosynthesis, where the plant takes in carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. My question is how those two stay balanced in a sealed glass jar. If the plant keeps taking carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, won't the carbon dioxide run out and won't the oxygen build up? That's my question. Here's what I was able to find. Number one, photosynthesis happens during the daytime, cellular respiration happens during the nighttime. And if you're a science whiz or wizard or whatever, if you know a lot about science, you know that cellular respiration is basically the opposite of photosynthesis. So the plant then would be taking in oxygen, releasing carbon dioxide. And let's not also forget about the little bugs in the terrarium that release carbon dioxide when they're breathing, just like you and me. And then also when part of the plant dies and then gets decomposed, that also releases carbon dioxide. And so that's what I was able to find. I'm still a little bit confused about this topic because it seems as though carbon dioxide and oxygen, those two, it still wouldn't be balanced. Even with those three things that I mentioned, it doesn't seem like enough carbon dioxide would be released. And so if anybody knows the answer, please drop a comment, explain it to me, because I'm still a little bit confused about this. Yeah. So that's really it, guys. That's probably going to be it for the video. Basically, all you need to know is that with a terrarium, everything needs to be balanced. I mean, it's an ecosystem. If it's balanced, it keeps living. If it's not balanced, it dies, all right? Pretty simple. And that's basically what I was trying to tell you. I hope everything makes sense. And, you know, comment down below if you need any answers to anything. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of fun seeing comments. So, anyways, like and subscribe if you want to. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace. So you remember the water cycle, right? So what is it? Evaporation, condensation, evaporation. Wait, no, that's not the, just a second. All right, looked at my notes. Evaporation, condensation. Dang. Yeah, I was right. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation. If you're a science person, if you're like Dave the science guy, if you're sciencey, if you like science, man, all this sciencey stuff is making me hungry. I apologize, guys. I just gotta eat, baby, just let me eat. Doesn't that look good?